Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming and welcome to Wilds. I've actually played the game in its entirety. Thank you to Capcom for some early access. Today, I'm going to give you a little talk on my thoughts about Wilds in a kind of review format, having completed the game and I'm well into the endgame now. Now, I do have to follow their guidelines, so I'm going to be very careful about what, say, you see on the screen, and also what topics I'm allowed to go into and how much. Please keep that in mind. There's a lot to show and cover, and when we're fully allowed, to say the least, we've got a lot to show. The reason I'm doing this little kind of talk-style review is to give you different insight from someone who simply likes Monster Hunter. Compared to Josh and his review, he's absolutely obsessed with this series. He's played it since the beginning of it. Meanwhile, I played 4th, 5th, and now 6th generation Monster Hunter, and while I do have some experience because of that, it's obviously not the same as Josh. I view Monster Hunter as a fantastic series that I'm always excited by, but compared to Josh, obviously I'm going to have a more level take on the series. Be aware that this discussion will be as anti-spoiler as much as possible. We're already limited by what we're allowed to show you, let alone talk about, so I wouldn't worry too much about me revealing anything too big here. But this talk will assume that you understand Wilds, maybe from playing the beta, and are semi-aware of the information around the game that they keep putting out into launch. So, with that context given, let's start with the story, which is ultimately it's a Monster Hunter story, but there's no denying that this is done significantly better than we've seen of any Monster Hunter story before. It was my understanding after discussion with Josh that the first time that they really leaned into the story was to do with gore magala and the frenzy and the way that affected the world and the monsters and the threat at large you had to deal with. Of course, it's not like they didn't have story before that, but when I'm saying story in this way, I mean a direct story they're trying to tell you and you're following along, not picking up breadcrumbs. As you progress into World, you see them really put story at the forefront. But I think it's fair to say that the story of World was definitely just a vehicle for the same familiar formula. Now, by comparison, the characters and their progression through the story, there's actual development, they drastically change throughout the story, as you learn about the people here, the world, and our place within it, as well as the very important kind of main story and mystery that's slowly being unpacked as you go. There absolutely are twists and turns, and it was engaging. If you're a big fan of the history of Monster Hunter and the big lore, according to Josh anyway from the discussions I've had with him, it addresses some things that have been in the background and have been in lore discussion for a long time. I think this story is one that people are going to be talking about and really weaning knowledge from for a while. I really appreciate the formatting of this. As I talked about in my first 5 hours session back in January, when we went to Capcom offices and we're allowed to talk about that, there's a new flow of the mission to mission. Instead of that familiar checklist formula where you're just repeatedly doing 4 or 5 hunts in a specific locale, then you fight the big bad, then you move to the next locale and do the same thing over and over. This is completely different. The priority here is the story, and how you engage with the monsters perfectly links up with that. Maybe you're going through an area and there's just a monster that's monster's territory, and whoops, someone's gone missing. And now you got to deal with the monster to get your friend back. It makes sense. It's a hunt in the context of the story that goes well beyond, alright, now I go kill that monster. A big part of the context of being a hunter is to manage the flow of the ecosystem, where certain monsters get too territorial or aggressive, exhibit really unusual behavior to the point where they're putting other species, their lives at risk, maybe even making them at threat of extinction. That's when you go hunt that kind of monster. The idea is you're not just killing monsters permanently for the vibes, but for a clear reason. And their reasoning and the context as to why we're hunting the monsters we do during the story, it's never been better. Not only is it significantly more varied than usual, but also where we are is greatly different. Instead of doing locale A to its completion, relative completion, then going to locale B and so on, it's much more back and forth. You're entering this huge world and you're exploring it following the story. That might take you into the Scarlet Forest actually much quicker than you might expect, but then you'll come back out of it. You'll go to the third locale. It's a completely different flow that feels very fresh, and because of that, much more engaging rather than repetitive. On that note, the weather system, compared to the beta where it was very invasive and it was a point of feedback actually where it was too often, the weather is going to be much less drastic and tied to the story. So when things change, it's for a reason. It's not necessarily permanent, but it feels a lot more natural, and as you progress through the story, you will begin to have some form of control over it, as confirmed in the recent Capcom event with PlayStation through some sort of rest mechanic they referenced. I will say that the physically connected maps is a really cool detail that's more of a passive thing. It's not like something you'll do often or maybe at all. Maybe you'll do it once when you enter the zone, and while you can do it whenever you like, it's probably going to be the case that you'll fast travel around more than likely. It's the fact that it's an option, that it's there, that makes the world feel actually like a one big connected place rather than separate levels in a video game. And that feeling spreads across many systems, that seamless design that they're so focused on. They call this game the seamless Monster Hunter, not the open world Monster Hunter. So that applies to the fact that you can cook anywhere, buffs last a timer rather than per quest, you can start quests at any time by attacking any monster. It just feels a lot less gamey because of this seamless concept that they've spread across all of the systems of the game. And part of that is the physically connected maps, even if you don't really engage with it that much. Obviously, a major topic though is the monsters and the unique designs that are there for Wilds. I think what's really cool about Wilds is not only is it a unique roster of honestly the best new monsters I've ever seen in a Monster Hunter game. Every single one of them is somehow awesome and super unique and super interesting, directly linked to say the locale it comes from, or with completely new and interesting behaviors, like say the pack and herd mechanics. Returning monsters are also uplifted and improved in many cases, where we see movesets from other versions of monsters associated or tied to them to make a single deeper fight that we have here. There's a lot of roster comparison in the community, whether it's how many monsters did we have at the start of World, how many monsters did we have at the start of Rise compared to Wilds. And so what I would suggest to you guys is to think more about, okay, how many new unique monsters did we have at the start of World and Rise? How many of those are standout? Wilds is just hit after hit after hit. And that's without saying anything about the really cool concept of the Apex monsters. They've said in past interviews that there's less of a focus on Elder Dragons compared to World, where obviously there was a super focus on that. And I think that's really exciting because it's given them something much more fresh in feel. These Apex monsters, the dominators of their respective locales, tied to the weather systems involved in those locales. You guys know how it felt to fight, say, Ray Dow the first time in the first beta. In the middle of that storm, the sounds that it makes, the way it harnesses the power, the way that the nest enhanced its moveset and reverberated the thunder and lightning effects. That is across the board for all of the Apexes. They all have that kind of feeling. Now, of course, the game also has low rank and high rank, as this is the base version of the game. There's no master rank, and there is a difference between low rank and high rank, and that's telling with the Apexes in particular. Each one of these Apex monsters is standout in the series in general, and I think are going to be very quickly fan favorites. Now, on the topic of weapons, there's a lot to say there, and I can't actually get into any details, so it's just going to be a short reference. I feel that the beta feedback changes have genuinely saved the opinion of some weapons. A key example would be, say, Switch Axe, which was absolutely off the mark for how the attack should perform and function in the betas. There was a lot of disappointment around how that weapon was performing. There are 4 weapons that have drastically changed from, say, the beta to launch version that they've told us about in the community update, though they did say that they touch on all the weapons and make minor or major adjustments to different ones. I feel that the beta and then the feedback they got from that to change and update the weapons has basically prevented certain big problem areas for the full game. Everyone should be excited for their main weapons. All 14 of them are feeling particularly good, but I just think the changes they made based on the beta feedback was a big deal. So of course we'll be talking about the weapons soon in the future. So the only other thing I want to mention for the weapons is the addition of focus mode, and of course from the betas, as we all know, it's majorly impactful on the gameplay. Many weapons are using focus mode beyond what they thought, such as faster, smaller weapons like dual blades, since it helps you stay on target, moving around the fight while accurately aiming at, say, the right hit zone like a head, but also sticking to a target properly with the forward momentum that it does give you, but also the way that you can aim to the side of a monster so that, say, your chainsaw charge blade actually lands in the perfect hit zone from the right distance. It has drastically changed the way the weapons feel and the way you can approach them. And that word, approach or approachable, I think really represents how these weapons feel. They're a lot more approachable because of focus mode being so helpful. That doesn't mean the weapons are simpler or more like babied or something, but I do think it helps people learn new weapons or learn the game easier because it's such a helpful tool. Now, there's two things I want to cover before we finish this video. One of them is the endgame, which we're not allowed to talk to you about. However, there was that Capcom event that they did with PlayStation called the Play event, where they just revealed multiple features that are in, say, later high rank areas. We're allowed to reference those, so I will. So fair warning, I'm about to talk about a few things that show up in high rank. Firstly, we have the reveal of the tempered monsters at the Play Capcom event. They showed the existence of tempered monsters, confirming them. These, as before, are monsters that have survived many battles, and so are stronger than a normal monster. Interestingly, in Wilds, as they specifically said in that event, they have weak points that hunters will be wise to target. So these new versions of the tempered monsters have some new mechanics for Wilds. They also showed decorations for weapon and armor that can be obtained from the additional rewards in high rank hunts. Multiple skill decorations can also be obtained with tempered monsters' additional rewards, so tempered monsters are particularly potent for the rewards you're after. But I can't say more than that. I will also reference the frenzied monsters. During that stream, they bumped into a frenzied monster. This is probably an expected feature of the game, considering the fact that they revealed a certain monster during trailer 6 that is tied to frenzy. And so yes, they encountered a frenzied monster, and so yes, that reveals their existence as a mechanic in the game. Obviously, there's another monster type that was revealed during one of the trailers as well that I will refer to here as the question mark monsters. I can't say any more about it now, I'll just reference the fact that they exist in this video. In regards to systems, they revealed the investigation system and how it appears to be slightly different here, rewarding decorations and relics. These quests will allow you to find monsters on the map and then basically save that hunt for later as an investigation quest. They showed us different rewards being decorations and relics, but what are relics? Well, they revealed the existence of Artian weapons in that livestream. To specifically quote what we're allowed to say, these can be crafted from Artian parts of the same rarity level. Those are obtained during tempered monster quests, as shown on the livestream. The required parts will differ based on the weapon, and Artian weapons can even be strengthened with relevant materials. So there are, indeed, various high-rank endgame systems. But I can say no more about it or show you any more than that. The last topic that I said I wanted to talk about, though, is difficulty. I think a lot of people are going to have an easier time with this game than when they first played any Monster Hunter, obviously. For many, that will be people who played World and got into Monster Hunter from that. In fact, there's a big chunk of people that even missed Rise and are going to return to the series with Wilds. These people are going to have an easier time because they've played the game for the first time. They understand maybe the weapons that they like to play. They understand the armor system, how to get skills, the general rules of fighting a monster and the tools you have available. It's going to be easier in that way, but is this an easier Monster Hunter game? Absolutely not. The depth of these monsters is significant. I just hope that people go in knowing, hey, I kind of know Monster Hunter, and so that's going to influence my experience here. Because you couldn't really ask for a better first experience with the depth and detail of the world and these monsters and the weapons. So I deeply envy someone trying Monster Hunter for the first time with Wilds. But you know, as someone playing this series for a while now, of course I didn't really struggle. That isn't to say there isn't tougher fights, there absolutely is. But it's that difference of being an experienced hunter versus a new one and how that plays into your first experience with a Monster Hunter game. But yeah, I'm keeping it there for this talk. That's the general vibe, and I hope I put across what I was meaning to without being able to show you everything or discuss anything too specific. This opportunity from Capcom to be able to play early and then be allowed to make our review video slightly early, even under tight guidelines, is a big one, and so we're very grateful. But you guys should expect a lot of Wilds coverage in the coming days, because this game is fantastic. For now then, I've been Hollow, you've been you, and thanks for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.